Good morning and Shavua Tov, everyone. This week's Torah portion is Ki Teitzei, and it begins with a sequel of 3 commandments. 3 different cases. However, our rabbis tell us that the 3 cases are actually intertwined with one another. The first scenario is a story about a soldier who's on the battlefield and sees a beautiful from the enemy's country and the soldier is infatuated with this woman. He lusts for her and he desires her to take her for a wife. The second story in the Torah portion is about a man who has 2 wives, one he loves and one he does not love. And now he wants to give a larger inheritance to the woman that he loves, this child. And the Torah says, no, you must give equal or the fair share to the oldest child, regardless if it's the child from the woman you love or the woman you despise. The third scenario and story in the Torah portion is the story about a wayward and rebellious child. And while at first glance these 3 stories seem independent, our rabbis explain to us that they're all intertwined, because it's actually a story in 3 parts. First, the man marries the woman for the wrong reasons. Not for love, but for lust. Not for a soul connection, but for physical attraction. Lust is about taking, love is about giving. They're completely opposite. Then he ends up hating the woman because he never loved her really. He was only attracted to her physically, so he ends up despising her. And ultimately, the child who was born from that union sees a marriage, unfortunately, that's not based on love, and this child becomes a wayward and rebellious child. And here rabbis teach us a very fundamental principle. Our rabbis say one good deed leads to another good deed. And one error, one mistake, one sin leads to another sin. And therefore our rabbis always tell us we have to have foresight. Who is a wise person, say our rabbis? One who can see the future. Don't just think about the momentary gain or pleasure, like that soldier on the battlefield who's infatuated with the beautiful captive woman. But rather think about the outcome, think about the consequences. Think about the long-term gains or losses and ramifications. Always weigh the momentary pleasure against the long-term losses and consequences. And this is so fundamental for human beings, the most important thing. And that's why when the Jews leave Egypt, Moshe Rabbeinu says, you were slaves in Egypt. In Egypt you had no free will. You couldn't say no to Pharaoh. But now you're a free people. And as a human being with free choice, you must learn how to say yes and how to say no. And only when you are in control, then your outcomes, your results in life will always be positive. Tell a story about a group of friends who are hedonistic. They just enjoy the moment, all the pleasures of life, always following their heart's desires, running after fame and fortune and pleasure and money and gambling and drinking and all the things that they did. And as they got older, they started to worry, what happens if we come to heaven and God holds accountable for the way we've lived our lives? But they decided whoever dies first will come to the rest of them in a dream and tell them what awaits them. Sure enough, a week later, one of them who died, his name was Zalman the Shikar, he comes up to heaven and he comes to his friends in a dream. He says, listen, he says, I came to heaven. They asked me, is it true that you weren't a good person? You followed all the pleasures of your heart constantly? He said, yeah, I like to live in the moment, enjoy the pleasures of life. Is it true you gambled? Yeah. Is it true you chased women? Yeah. Is it true you were always partying and having a good time and never really living up to your responsibilities as a Jew? He says, true. He said, why? He said, because I like to live and enjoy the moment. I don't think long term. He said, what about vodka? We see you drink a lot of vodka. What about that? He says, yeah, that too. They say, but 1 minute, vodka has a bitter taste. Why would you drink vodka? He says, well, of course it's bitter, but the after effects are so amazing. You feel high, you feel great. So they said to him, so you do know how to think about the outcome and the effects of what you're doing at the moment. You're able to transcend the momentary discomfort or pain or pleasure for the greater good. So why didn't you do that in all other areas of your life? Have a wonderful day.